At 3 a.m., on my fifth delivery, I watched the Scarecrow in the field slowly turn its head, tracking my truck as I drove past. Its straw face seemed to grin in the faint glow of my tail lights, and I knew I was miles from any other sign of life. Story 1, The Cabin on Old Man's Road. This happened to me in the fall of 2019, when I was working nights at Tony's Pizza, in a sleepy little town called Oakhaven. Most people think of pizza delivery as a casual, fun job, but when you're doing the graveyard shift, it's mostly just long stretches of boredom punctuated by the occasional craving for pepperoni. My shifts usually ran from 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. The last few hours, especially after midnight, were always the slowest. The only calls coming in were usually from college kids cramming or the odd insomniac. I knew every street, every back road, every shortcut within a 20-mile radius. One particular Tuesday, around 2:15 a.m., the old landline rang, jarring me out of a half-doze. I picked it up, expecting the usual order, large pepperoni, extra cheese, pay with card. But the address the dispatcher gave me was different. It was 2201 Old Man's Road. I paused, a little confused. I'd never heard of an Old Man's Road in Oakhaven. The closest I could think of was Old Mill Road, which led out into the county's most rural, sparsely populated areas. I asked the dispatcher to confirm, and she patiently repeated the address. "Yep, that's what's on the screen. Says a cabin. Cash payment, too." A cabin? Deep in the woods at 2:30 a.m. A tiny sliver of unease threaded its way into my usual indifference. I grabbed the hot bag, the smell of pizza a familiar comfort, and headed out to my beat-up sedan. The night air was crisp, typical for late October. A thin, sliver moon hung in the sky, barely illuminating the winding country roads. The directions led me further and further from town, past the last streetlight, past the last farm with a porch light on. I was soon on Route 42, which quickly became unpaved and potholed. This certainly wasn't Old Mill Road. My headlights cut through the oppressive darkness, illuminating only the immediate stretch of gravel ahead. After about 15 minutes of driving through what felt like an endless tunnel of trees, I saw a weathered, almost illegible sign nailed to an ancient oak, Old Man's Road. It was barely more than a deer path, overgrown with weeds, dipping steeply into an even darker abyss. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold ran down my spine. This was way out there. The kind of place you only went if you really wanted to be alone. Or if you didn't want to be found. I hesitated for a moment, my internal compass screaming at me to turn back. But a delivery was a delivery. I needed the money, and a no-show meant I'd have to pay for the wasted food out of pocket. Swallowing my apprehension, I turned onto the road. The road was just wide enough for my car, flanked by dense, skeletal trees that seemed to claw at the sky. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crunch of my tires on dead leaves and the low hum of my engine. No crickets, no rustling animals, just an unnerving stillness. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the path opened up slightly. Ahead, partially obscured by more overgrown trees, stood a cabin. It was a dilapidated, two-story structure, dark and uninviting. Not a single light glowed from any window. I pulled up to what might have once been a driveway, parking a little ways back from the porch. The air around the cabin felt heavy, somehow colder than the surrounding night. A faint, almost imperceptible scent of damp earth and something vaguely metallic hung in the air. I grabbed the pizza and the cash-out bag, stepping out into the oppressive quiet. The porch creaked ominously under my weight as I approached the front door. There was no doorbell, just a heavy, dark wood door that looked like it hadn't been painted in decades. I knocked, a little louder than usual, hoping to stir someone. The sound echoed unnaturally in the stillness. I waited. Nothing. No footsteps, no voice, no rustling inside. I knocked again, harder this time, calling out, "Pizza delivery." Still nothing. The silence began to press in, a suffocating weight. My breath plumed white in the frigid air, and I could feel my heart thumping a little faster than it should. This was wrong. All of it. The address, the road, the silence. I debated leaving the pizza on the porch, but it felt risky. What if they never came out? What if some animal got to it? More importantly, I needed that cash. As I considered my options, a subtle shift in the cabin's dark facade caught my eye. One of the upstairs windows, a black square against the darker wood, seemed to deepen in shadow. It wasn't a trick of the moonlight, there was no moonlight. It was as if something inside had moved, a silent, almost imperceptible drawing back from the pane. I stared, straining my eyes, trying to make sense of it. Then, I saw them. Not one, but two figures, pressed against the glass. They were impossibly thin, gaunt, like skeletal shadows. Their faces were indistinct, lost in the gloom, but their posture, they were watching me. A jolt of pure terror shot through me. My body reacted before my mind could process it. My hand, still holding the pizza bag, felt suddenly numb. I knew, with absolute certainty, that no one was going to open that door. They were just watching. I placed the pizza down on the porch step, careful not to make any sudden movements, though my hands were trembling. I didn't care about the money anymore. I just wanted to be gone. I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off that window. As I reached my car, fumbling for the door handle, I risked a quicker glance back. The figures hadn't moved. They were still there, two perfectly still, gaunt silhouettes, silently observing me. Their stillness was more terrifying than any scream. I scrambled into my car, slamming the door shut and locking it. My hands shook so violently I could barely get the key into the ignition. I cranked the engine, throwing it into reverse, my tires spitting gravel as I sped away from the cabin. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden, jarring silence of the car. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror, just focused on getting out of there, back to the relative safety of Route 42. Back to civilization. I drove like a madman, the potholes jarring my teeth, the branches scraping against the sides of my car. I was almost back to the main county road, a mile or so from the cabin, when it happened. The engine sputtered. A choked cough, then another, and then, with a final, dying gasp, silence. The headlights flickered, then died, plunging me into absolute, suffocating darkness. My car rolled to a slow, agonizing halt. No. No, no, no. This couldn't be happening. I tried the ignition again. Nothing. Just a weak click, then silence. I tried again, my hand trembling so hard I almost missed the keyhole. Still nothing. Dead. Completely dead. A fresh wave of panic, colder and sharper than before, washed over me. I was stranded. Here. On Old Man's Road. My phone. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers slick with sweat. No signal. Of course. Why would there be? My eyes darted to the rearview mirror. The road behind me was just an inky black tunnel. But then, a flicker. A faint, distant movement in the trees. Something was coming. They were coming. I heard it then. A faint, almost inaudible rustling in the leaves, coming from the direction of the cabin. It wasn't the wind. It was too rhythmic, too deliberate. The sound of something moving through the undergrowth, slowly, steadily approaching. My heart was a frantic bird trapped in my chest, beating against my ribs. I whimpered, a small, pathetic sound lost in the vast silence. I tried my phone again, desperate, willing it to work. One bar. Just one tiny, flickering bar. I called 911. The line connected, crackling with static. "Hello? 911, what's your emergency?" a voice said, tinny and far away. I'm stranded. Old Man's Road. My car died. Something's out here." The rustling was closer now, accompanied by a faint, wet dragging sound. And then, a shadow. Tall, impossibly thin, detached from the other shadows of the trees, moved into the edge of my dim vision, just behind my car. A second one followed. "What do you mean, something's out there, sir? Where exactly are you?" the dispatcher's voice crackled. My voice was a strangled sob. "They're coming. From the cabin. I saw them. They're not right." A tapping. A light, deliberate tap on my back window. Not a heavy knock, but a delicate, almost skeletal tap. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing it wasn't real. It was. Too real. "Sir. Are you there? We're trying to get a lock on your location. Can you describe what you see?" The dispatcher sounded urgent, but she was miles away. Too far. I opened my eyes, slowly, to the horror in my rearview mirror. Two faces, impossibly pale, stretched and gaunt, were pressed against the glass, inches from my head. Their eyes, deep-set and black, held no pupils, only an empty void. Their mouths were wide, gaping holes, a silent scream of unnatural hunger. A wet, gurgling sound emanated from just outside my window, a sound that wasn't human. My phone slipped from my grasp, falling to the floor. The last thing I heard was the dispatcher's frantic voice, then a tearing sound, like old cloth. And then, absolute, cold, consuming darkness. My car was found 2 days later, abandoned on Old Man's Road, the doors unlocked, the hot bag of pizza still sitting on the passenger seat, cold and uneaten. I, the driver, was gone. Vanished. The police found no tracks in the mud, no signs of a struggle, nothing to suggest what had happened. Just the car, and the silence. No trace of me, or of what had pursued me, has ever been found. And if you ever get a late-night delivery order for an address you don't know, deep in the woods, for a cabin that's eerily dark, turn back. Don't stop. Because some places aren't just remote, they're waiting. Story 2, The Scarecrow's Route. This happened to me in the fall of 2019, when I was working nights as an overnight package driver for Swift Logistics. My route covered the sleepy, forgotten corners of rural Pennsylvania, mostly around Chester and Lancaster counties. My shift ran from midnight to 8 in the morning, a solitary existence that suited me just fine. It was just me, the steady hum of the old Ford Transit, the smell of pine air freshener and stale coffee, and the endless ribbon of dark, winding roads. Route 73 was my usual, a meandering stretch of dirt and gravel that connected isolated farmhouses and tiny, forgotten hamlets. I'd grown to appreciate the quiet solitude, the crisp night air, and the sheer emptiness of it all. My only companions were the occasional deer, the distant glow of a farmhouse window, and the sunflower seeds I'd chew through to stay awake. It was a monotonous job, but peaceful, rarely any surprises, just the rhythmic grind of deliveries. One night, about 2 weeks into October, I was on my usual run, making good time. The air was colder than usual, carrying the damp, earthy scent of fallen leaves and coming rain. That's when I saw the first one. Off to the side of a long, straight stretch, leaning against a rusted fence post in a field, was a scarecrow. Nothing unusual about that, it's farmland, after all. But this one seemed different. Its clothes were tattered denim and flannel, its head a burlap sack with 2 large, black button eyes sewn on, and a wide, stitched-on grin. It faced vaguely towards the road, and the overall impression was just slightly more menacing than the typical straw man. I dismissed it, chalking it up to an overactive imagination fueled by too much coffee and not enough sleep. Farmers get creative sometimes, right? I drove on, forgetting about it for a while as I focused on my next delivery. About an hour later, after navigating a particularly dark, winding stretch of road, I saw another one. It was positioned in a field, much closer to the road this time, maybe 20 feet from the shoulder. My breath hitched. It was identical to the first. Same tattered clothes, same burlap head, same creepy button eyes and stitched grin. A flicker of unease went through me. Had I driven in a circle? No, that was impossible. I knew this route like the back of my hand. I slowed down, squinting through the windshield. The feeling of being watched intensified, a sudden, inexplicable chill raising goosebumps on my arms. I accelerated again, telling myself it was just a strange coincidence, maybe a farmer with a bizarre sense of humor and a lot of spare straw. A few more deliveries passed without incident, but the image of those identical scarecrows lingered. Then, after making a drop-off at an old stone farmhouse, I turned onto another narrow track. There it was again. A third scarecrow. This one was even closer, practically at the edge of the property line, almost within arm's reach of my truck. My heart started to pound a little faster. This wasn't normal. This wasn't a coincidence. Its button eyes seemed fixed directly on my vehicle, and for a split second, I swore I saw a faint glint from them, like they were reflecting the meager moonlight. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. I hit the gas, leaving a trail of dust in my wake. Panic started to bubble up, hot and cold at the same time. I tried to reason with myself, sleep deprivation, rural paranoia, the quiet making everything seem louder, scarier. But the feeling of being hunted was becoming undeniable. I had one last delivery before heading towards the highway, an isolated cabin tucked deep in the woods. As I rounded the final bend before its long, unlit driveway, my headlights swept across the scene. There it stood. The fourth scarecrow. Right beside the mailbox, no more than 10 feet from my truck. It was positioned perfectly, as if waiting for me. Its head was tilted slightly, and those button eyes seemed to hold an intelligence that made my blood run cold. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. This wasn't funny anymore. This was a direct, terrifying message. I couldn't just drive past it. I couldn't ignore it. Every fiber of my being screamed to flee, but a desperate, irrational need to understand took over. I needed to know if it was real, or if I was losing my mind. I pulled over, my hands shaking as I cut the engine. The silence that descended was absolute, unnerving. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight, the beam cutting a hesitant path through the oppressive darkness. My heart hammered against my ribs. Opening the door, a sudden gust of wind swept through the cab, carrying the distinct scent of damp earth and rotting straw. I stepped out, my boots crunching on the gravel. Every shadow seemed to stretch and writhe. I walked slowly, one tentative step after another, towards the scarecrow. The flashlight beam danced over its burlap face, highlighting the crude stitching of its grin. It looked exactly like the others, an unsettling mirror image of something I'd seen 4 times now. My brain tried to rationalize it, some strange local art project, a prank gone too far. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. The malice radiating from the thing felt too real, too ancient. I got within a few feet, close enough to see the coarse texture of the straw poking through the threadbare clothing. I raised the flashlight, sweeping it over the button eyes, trying to find some telltale sign of a trick, a wire, anything. Nothing. Just crude buttons. But as I lowered the light, convinced I was just sleep-deprived and paranoid, I saw it. A tiny, almost imperceptible shift. One of the buttons, its right one, seemed to rotate ever so slightly. Just a millimeter, but it was enough. My body reacted before my mind could process it. A primal scream tore through me. I didn't run. I bolted. Full-on sprint back to the truck, fumbling for the door handle. I threw myself inside, slamming the door shut and locking it with a frantic click. My hands trembled so violently I could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, a comforting sound against the silence of the night. I slammed the shifter into drive. I sped away, leaving the cabin and the Scarecrow in a cloud of dust. My heart was pounding like a drum solo. I tried to tell myself it was a trick of the light, fatigue, my imagination running wild. But I knew. Something was wrong. Deeply, horrifyingly wrong. I drove like a madman, pushing the old van to its limits, desperate to reach the highway, to reach the safety of streetlights and other people. I rounded a final, sharp bend, a curve I'd driven hundreds of times. This was it, the last turn before the paved road, before I could breathe again. I always looked for the old, gnarled oak tree that marked the spot. But there was no tree. Only darkness. And then, in the path of my headlights, I saw it. Standing there. In the middle of the narrow dirt road. Not off to the side. Not by a mailbox. Directly in my path. Blocking me. Impassable. The fifth Scarecrow. I slammed on the brakes. The tires shrieked, skidding wildly. Dust exploded around the van. I was thrown forward against my seatbelt. The truck shuddered to a halt. Inches away. It was right there. Right outside my windshield. Staring. The same Scarecrow. Identical. But now, its button eyes were fixed. Directly on me. Unblinking. Unwavering. They weren't just looking. They were fixated. Knowing. They held an ancient, malevolent intelligence that spoke of pure, unadulterated evil. I couldn't move. I was frozen. My mind screamed, but no sound escaped my throat. The silence was absolute. No crickets. No wind. Just the frantic pounding of my own heart against my ribs. A deep, chilling cold filled the cab, even though the heater was blasting. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was going to die. Or worse. I had to get out. I wrenched the door open with a strength born of pure terror. Scrambled out of the truck. Didn't look back. Just ran. Into the dark. Left the truck, the packages, everything. Ran until my lungs burned. Ran until I collapsed, gasping, shaking, miles from anywhere. I don't remember much after that. Just running, and waking up, disoriented, in a ditch by a highway, miles from my truck. Eventually, I stumbled to a gas station and called for help. The police found my swift dash van a few days later. Wrecked. Off the road, slammed into an embankment. No sign of a collision with anything else. No sign of me in the wreckage. But there was something inside. Something impaled on the steering wheel, right where my hands would have been. A Scarecrow. The exact same one. Its button eyes stared out through the broken windshield, fixed on nothing. My body was gone. They never found me in the truck. The police closed the case as a hit and run, maybe a confused driver fleeing the scene, but they considered me missing, presumed dead. But I was the driver. I did abandon the vehicle. And I know what was left behind. What was staring out of that truck. And I know it wasn't me. Every night now, I see those button eyes. I hear a faint rustling in the dead of night outside my window. Sometimes, I feel a sudden, inexplicable chill, the scent of damp earth filling my room. And I wonder, where did my body go? Was it replaced? Or is it still out there, on that lonely route, a scarecrow of straw and cloth, waiting. And if you ever drive those quiet country roads, late at night, and you see something that doesn't quite fit, something watching from the shadows, don't stop. Don't even slow down. Because sometimes, the things that watch, want to get closer.